When I went around the world making speeches about IEEE, I always had a few slides on volunteers and volunteerism, and I thanked people for being volunteers, and I mentioned that most people don't realize it, and when I first calculated this, people didn't believe me, that IEEE has well over 200,000 volunteers. And I went through the arithmetic, and after I showed the arithmetic to people, they said, wow, that looks right. And in publications alone, we have about 200,000 volunteers because last year we had added 240,000 articles to IEEE Explorer. Of those, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 were journal articles. Journal articles are peer-reviewed. The average number of reviewers is 3. The average acceptance rate is probably under 50%, which means you have to submit at least 2 papers on the average to get one published. So if you submit 2 papers, each has to have 3 reviewers. That's 6 reviewers times 35,000 papers. You multiply 35,000 by 6 reviewers, and you right away get over 200,000 volunteer reviewers. Now, there are some duplications there, so if you subtract it, maybe it's a little under, but the authors are also volunteers. The editors are volunteers. So just in the publication area alone, we have about 200,000 volunteers. And then we have 1,000 conferences, program committees, organizing committees, at least 100 volunteers on the average for those. That's a lot of volunteers. That's another 100,000 volunteers. Then we have a lot of standards committees, like we have on the order of 1,000 standards committees. Each one of those has a bunch of members. We have sections, chapters all over the world. So if you add it all up, the number comes out to well over 200,000. And I've been claiming that the IEEE has at least 200,000 volunteers.
There's 200,000 unique individuals? But of course, many people serve in more than...
Right.
You know, so someone who is an author of paper is also likely to be a reviewer of other papers, and may also be on a conference committee.
Absolutely true. And when I added up all the numbers, I came out with a number like 800,000.
Right.
Okay, so I said, okay, let's assume that some of these are duplicates, so I feel that 200,000 is a safe number, that IEEE has at least 200,000 volunteers. Now again, I come back to the point I made before. Many of these volunteers are not IEEE members. Okay, but people are loyal to their technical communities, not to IEEE. People are devoted members of my community, Frequency Control, who couldn't care less about IEEE. One year, I discovered somehow that the general chair, the number one, the leader, the number one guy on this conference, the Frequency Control Symposium, was not an IEEE member. And this guy is a world-renowned scientist. His name is Dave Allen. And there is a quantity called Allen variance, which is a standard measure for frequency stability. So he's well known throughout the world, not an IEEE member. So the opportunity, I said, Dave, how come you're not an IEEE member? I just learned that you're not an IEEE member. He looks at me and says, why would I want to join a bunch of engineers? Engineers Today, IEEE USA's publication. This is the reaction you get when you publish something called Engineers Today. Today's engineer. Okay? People don't want to join an organization that's perceived to be for engineers. So that's been one of my issues, constant themes. Whenever I could, I would advocate that we take steps to become known as an organization of technologists, not just engineers.